Oh hi there boys and ghouls, are you ready for a bedtime story? My name's Megan if you're new here, and if not, welcome back to Here She Lies, a fact or fiction horror podcast that will have you questioning everything you once held dear. Each week, we'll explore another heart-stopping tale of terror. Some of them are true, and others are just big fat fibs. It's up to you to decide which is which. If you're watching over on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. If you're watching via your favourite podcast app, then don't forget to leave a big juicy 5-star review. Make sure you have your say either in the comments box below or over on our Instagram page at Here She Lies Podcast. Now, before you grab your snacks and position yourself behind the sofa, I'll reveal the answer to last week's episode. If you're like me and you've got the memory span of a small child, not to worry, I'll give you a quick refresher. It's California in the early 1990s, and 19-year-old farm girl Brittany Chavez has just been handed the opportunity of a lifetime to feature in Playboy magazine. Despite her religious background, she poses for the Racy Lads mag and subsequently pays the ultimate price for her Hollywood golden tan. Due to extreme UV exposure, the Oklahoma teen is basically fried from the inside out. It's an absolutely horrific tale, one that warns young girls and guys of the dangers of sunbeds. But was it true? Let's look at the biology. Overexposure can lead to blistering and severe damage of the outer layers of her skin, but can it do the same to her insides? Was Brittany just another victim of the hot coffin, or was she simply a character that I cooked up in my head? Well, as much as it may shock you, this story about the playmate who was sizzling like a strip of maple bacon is in fact nothing but a lie, baby. And if you're screaming, but Megan, no, I've heard this one before. It happened to a girl in the next town over from me, then you, my friend, have been a victim of an urban legend. Yes, the story of the woman who was killed by her own vanity has been told around many a campfire. Sometimes she's a raging bridezilla, racing to get that last minute tan. In my version, however, she's a promising young model who would do anything for her big break. Is it even physically possible? No. But does it make a good story? Yes. So I hope you enjoyed it. And without further ado, let's move on to this week's Fable of Fright. To mix things up, I'll be reading this in the first person narrative. So my little gremlins, arm yourselves with some salt, lock up the family Ouija board, and welcome to episode 6 of Here She Lies. I call this one Hit the Road Jack.
911, what's your emergency?
You calling me a liar?
Oh my god, you coming? We are coming.
My heart was racing as Jack rounded the next tight bend. He wasn't a very good driver, that I knew, but I was in no position to complain. So like always, I stayed quiet. It had been so long since I'd been out, and to be honest, I was just happy to be included. Cheryl's shrill laugh promptly roared from the front passenger seat and jolted me from my self-indulgent thoughts. Cheryl and Jack had been dating on and off for quite some time, and she was obviously way more into him than he was her. She was looking to get engaged, a point she'd already brought up 3 times since I hopped into the back seat of the car. Thankfully, I wasn't alone with the so-called happy couple. I had Jimmy and Elsie in the back with me. I liked Elsie, she was funny, and although I didn't quite understand all of her jokes and references, she seemed nice enough. Jimmy, well, he was a character. Just joke after joke. Elsie could barely get a word in edgeways, and I didn't even dare to try. So far, the journey had been rather uneventful. The rain was pouring hard that night, a fact that obviously didn't concern Jack as he accelerated up towards the bluff. His car was fast, very fast, and the model wasn't one I'd ever seen before. Although that doesn't really say much, because I was never any good with those things. According to Mum, it was improper for girls to be muddling around with machines. Oh Lord, my mother would have died on the spot if she knew I was in the car with two boys. I'd found myself on the other end of her slipper for much less. I looked at Cheryl as she kicked her white plimsolls up on the dashboard. I was envious of her, not for any superficial reasons, although she was beautiful, but for her freedom. She was clearly confident and was either raised in a far more lenient household than I, or she was simply so self-assured that she didn't fear consequences. Out of the five of us, Jack was the only one who seemed excited to be here. He was practically jumping in his seat. I, on the other hand, was feeling anxious. I didn't want to be there, but what choice did I have? I wasn't the one driving. If I had been, we would have been out of there before we'd even reached the last road sign. But no, Jack, ever the daredevil, just had to check if the rumours were true. So here we were on Hudson's Bluff at 2:45 in the morning. A loud clap of thunder rumbled overhead. Great. I felt like I was trapped in a monster picture. The others didn't seem bothered by our now very sinister looking surroundings. It probably added to the thrill. I mean, what's better than ghost hunting on a dark and stormy old road? Nothing, apparently. The car pulled into a passing place and suddenly a wave of unease washed over me. This place had always given me the creeps, and as I watched Jack pull out an old talking board, that feeling only worsened. What was he up to? I was glad to see a terrified Elsie shared my reaction. Jack? No, she said. I'm all for a Halloween scare, but that board you've got there, it's asking for a whole different kind of trouble. Yes, Elsie. I was too scared to speak up for myself, and to be honest, there'd be no point anyway. Everybody always ignored what I had to say, especially those popular types like Jack and Cheryl. I waited silently, hanging back with Jimmy, who also kept stun. I hoped that this was it, that Jack would throw the devil board back in the trunk and we'd move on. But he didn't. Nope, he just plopped himself down on the wet gravel, patting the ground next to him where Cheryl then sat. I tried to be cool, but admittedly I was uncomfortable with this whole thing. I'm not even sure what he was hoping to achieve, and in watching him call out to the great beyond, I couldn't help but let out a giggle. Damn, I think he caught that. Jack was now looking right at me. I tried to shuffle behind Jimmy, hoping he'd think it had come from Elsie. Thankfully, he didn't call me out and moved back to the board. Cheryl was recklessly pushing the planchette around, allowing the droplets of rain to slide it from one side to the other. The road was deserted, which brought me little peace. Somehow the deafening silence only made things worse. I felt like I was vibrating, constantly searching for the sound of a broken branch or heavy footstep. I could tell that Elsie was just as nervous as I was. She too could sense that something just wasn't right. I watched on as one by one everybody joined Jack around the board, rolling my eyes as Cheryl pulled a large black candle out of her brown leather satchel. Many teens in Seabrook ventured up here attempting to raise the dead on Halloween night. It had almost become sort of a local rite of passage for high schoolers. They would slink up to the bluff after midnight only to wave their sage around and rattle their wind chimes. If you want my opinion, the whole ritual was kind of embarrassing. But in a tiny town like Seabrook, there wasn't much else to keep you entertained. As the others huddled in the rain conducting their mini seance, I moved around to the side of the car. It was now 3:05. We'd been at this for over 20 minutes, and I was growing impatient. I slumped down into the front seat. Jack had left the driver's side door open, and from there I had a better view of the surrounding forest and the road below. Keeping watch, I heard the group bickering amongst themselves. I never really understood people's fascination with the afterlife. You live, you die, and hopefully you go to heaven. All this talk about limbo and spirits being trapped on earth made me uneasy as a girl. It's ironic really, thinking about it now. As I sat motionless against the cool soft leather, I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of the rain battering against the windshield. Despite the spooky connotations of thunderstorms, I found them rather peaceful. To me, it was nature's way of taking everything and washing it clean. My mother used to say it was the sound of the angels fighting. But my mother used to say a lot of things I now know weren't true. My short moment of calm was suddenly interrupted by a forceful crunch coming from the north side of the woods. I froze, tensing up in terror. Yelling over my shoulder, I finally mustered up the courage to speak. "Jack, I think we should hit the road now." At the same time, the car radio hissed back to life. Almost in unison, Cheryl, Jack, Jimmy and Elsie's heads spun towards the car. Towards me. As my anxiety increased, so did the volume on the radio. An unfamiliar song now belted from the speakers.
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more.
Jack ran towards the car screaming, "I knew it! I knew the rumours were true. This place is definitely haunted." I was more concerned about the noise I'd just heard coming from the tree line. We weren't alone, but it wasn't the threat of the supernatural that I feared. I looked to Elsie, hoping that she would be the voice of reason we clearly needed in this moment, but she just stayed put, huddled on a small rock. Hurrying back to the others and the Ouija board, Jack ordered Cheryl to try it again. She was soaked to the skin and was having a lot of trouble keeping the candle lit. She even singed her hands multiple times whilst cupping them over the dancing flame. The heavy footsteps in the distance grew louder. I wanted to scream at the others to get back in the car, but instead I just stared ahead, tears in my eyes, suspended in fear. I knew he was coming, and I knew what he would do if he found them here. Dark thoughts of a blinding pain and a red viscous liquid mixing with the grubby rainwater flashed through my mind. I felt like I was waking up from a nightmare, and every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was the shadow of a man, and in his hand was a sharp blade that shone in the moonlight. Grabbing my head with both hands, I pleaded for the images to stop. I felt sick to my stomach, and although I knew it was pointless, I yelled for the others to help me. Simultaneously, the talking board skated across the ground, picking up dirt and twigs as it flew from Jack's grasp. He watched on in horror as it moved all by itself in the direction of the car. "Okay, Jack, you've had your fun, but I'm going home. No more rain, no more ghosts, it's time to go." I could have hugged Elsie in that moment. At last, someone was talking sense, and I couldn't wait to get in the back seat and get out of there. Apparently, despite his macho bravado, Jack had had enough too. He grabbed the board from the wet ground and ordered the rest of the gang to get back in the car. With my gaze fixed on the woods nearby, I positioned myself once again between Jimmy and Elsie and sighed in relief as Cheryl slammed the door behind her. Okay, this was it. Now we were home free. Only I wasn't met with the same obnoxious roar of the engine. Instead, there was a deep sputtering sound. The car wouldn't start. If I didn't feel like the leading lady in a horror picture before, I certainly did now. Everyone else groaned in frustration, all totally unaware of the real danger that existed only meters away. I frantically looked around, my head on a constant swivel. To say I was on edge would be a massive understatement, and through the rain on the windows, it was hard to distinguish a low-hanging branch from the monster that I knew would soon be approaching if we didn't move. I screamed to Jack to step on it, but it was no use. My cries were lost amongst the muffled complaints of the others. There was nothing I could do for them now. The thing I feared most, the thing I tried all evening to stop from happening, was taking place, and all I could do was watch. I closed my eyes and prayed that once again the darkness would take me, and that I would find myself in that same pit of nothingness, at least until next year. Until another group of foolish and unassuming teens had the bright idea of raising the dead. I was angry at their ignorance and angry at myself for not being strong enough to save them. I slammed my hand against the back of Jack's seat. Why did you bring them here? How could you be so foolish? With the hard slap of my palm, the idle machine suddenly roared into motion. The car sat in neutral, but through some miracle, we were moving forward. Everyone started screaming in a mixture of excitement and fright. Jack grabbed a hold of the wheel as the car continued up the bluff towards the next exit. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and if I could have cried in that moment, I would have. As we rounded the final bend, I peeked out of the back window. And there he was. I could barely make out his silhouette through the raindrops, but it was definitely him. His rage was practically pulsating through the air. Jack threw on his turn signal as the car veered left and down the hill. Just like that, I once again found myself standing in the middle of the road. My blue and white polka dot dress waving in the breeze. My raven locks, perfectly curled around my face, remained untouched by the rain. It had been 34 years since I first slipped on that dress. I loved it so much back then. But now, stained and torn, it only served as a cruel reminder of the life that I lost. Well, perhaps lost isn't the right word. After all, it was stolen from me. One of the longest running cold cases in Seabrook's history, Jimmy had called it. But it's not all bad. Every year on Hallows Eve, you can always rely on a bunch of idiotic youths to partake in a little witchcraft. And so, I return to the road. I do my best to protect them whilst they ignorantly frolic around with their trinkets on what was once an active crime scene. My crime scene. Now do I wish that I could just slink off to that little room in heaven that God has reserved for me? Of course I do. There'd be no more gruesome flashbacks and those awful headaches would finally stop. But for whatever reason, that isn't my path, and for now, I'm needed here. You see, my killer hasn't been caught, and as long as he roams free, so will I. He used to come here a lot, you know, but it's been a while. I often wonder if he died, but I think I already know the answer to that. No, he's still out there somewhere, and until he's dead or behind bars, I'll stay right where I am, making sure he never hurts anyone, ever again. The end. Ooh, that was a twisty-turny one, wasn't it? First she's just a girl hanging out with her pals, and all of a sudden, she's a ghost. Speaking of ghosts, I always had the biggest crush on Casper, especially in Casper Meets Wendy. I actually wanted to be Hilary Duff so bad that I faked a vocal fry for the best part of 9 years. Even if you don't believe in the afterlife, you must have heard the thousands of reports regarding so-called haunted roads. Years ago, I heard the one about a man who's stopped by a woman in a white dress. He asks if she needs a ride. She says yeah. He says get in. And then when they pass a nearby cemetery, poof, she just disappears. Yes, we're never sure on claims of paranormal passengers, but was this particular story based on one? Was the woman in the polka dot dress a real-life murder victim turned spectral saviour? Or did I just make the whole thing up in my noggin? I guess you'll have to tune in next week to find out. However, before you scurry off to share a bed with mummy and daddy, we have a game to play. It's time for Pants on Fire. Now it's your turn in the hot seat, and you guys did not disappoint. I asked you to tell me what is the worst lie you've ever told. And geez Louise, some of you deserve to be behind bars. Whilst digging through the garbage can of filth that you sent me, I was able to find one that is YouTube appropriate. So here we go. When I was around 13-14, I had a sleepover. She brought over some of those bagged wine coolers, the red kind. Very nice. Of course, I didn't tell my mum we were drinking, and that's the first level of deceit in this story. Somewhere along the line, some was spilled onto the beige carpet in my room, under my computer desk. Level 2. In my brilliance, I decided to pour bleach directly onto the stain. Rookie mistake, that one. Rookie mistake. Level 3. As the colour faded from the carpet, I freaked, trying to think of how to repair it. I took lots of my liquid foundation and just rubbed it into the stain. In the morning, it was all dried and crusty, but the colour matched surprisingly well. I left it there for 2+ years. When we moved out, my mum was cleaning the apartment out and discovered the mess while I was at school. I came in and she was on the floor scrubbing, saying, "I don't know what you spilled on this carpet. I'm cleaning it up, but it's actually bleaching as I go." Never told her. Level 5 lie right there. Honestly, watching your mum scrub at it as it continues to bleach the carpet is a new level of diabolical. If it makes you feel any better, usually when people move in, they'll rip the carpets out. So, you didn't do anything that bad. The worst thing you probably did was the crime against that bottle of brand new foundation. Remember to send over your confessions to heresheliespodcast@gmail.com. I can't wait to see what the rest of you have been cooking up. And on that deceitful note, I bid you adieu. Find out next week if it was false or if it was true. Good night.
911, what's your emergency?
You calling me a liar?
Oh my god, you coming?
We are coming.